Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another PalaView Market Research video. Today, we're going to be discussing my reading list. This is a list of books that I've read that I would recommend to each and every one of you if you're interested in becoming a master of the universe. This is likely, actually, this is for sure the most requested thing that my friends, family, and my personal life have been asking for, and also you guys here at PalaView have been asking for, okay? So let's just dive in. But for context, before we get started, I am starting the video off with more market research related books so that, because that's what this channel is for mostly, right? So I want to start with that and then it'll get progressively more esoteric as we go. Because at the end of the day, if we're interested in becoming masters of the universe, we need to become extremely well-rounded individuals who can have conversations with anybody, can impress the Wall Street hedge fund manager and also that, goth girl, I guess. Let's get into it. First one, From Third World to First by Lee Kuan Yew. This is an extremely important book, and that's why it's the first one. Because Lee Kuan Yew is an individual. He wrote this book, obviously, so that's what makes it so unique. But he's such an exceptional person, very underappreciated here in the West. He created Singapore. Basically, you can give him all the credit for what Singapore is today. He took it from a third world country, like the title suggests, to a first world country. And what's really unique about this book is that it helps you think in first principles regarding social and economic issues, and therefore market opportunities, right? So if you want to become a great deal maker, if you want to look at markets differently, this is a phenomenal book. It's a huge book, but I highly recommend it to anybody. Against the Gods, A Remarkable Story of Risk. I've brought this up on this channel once before. This is an absolute must. If you are participating in markets, you have to understand risk. And the history of how human beings have perceived risk throughout time is what this book is all about. It's just phenomenal, okay? Henry Kissinger's Diplomacy. This is basically just a history book, but obviously Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State for a long time. And he was basically like, you can think of Henry Kissinger as like the Sith Lord of the American Empire for the 20th century. I think that's a pretty fair description. Um, you know, Emperor Palpatine or whatever. So basically, he just walks through all these different amazing examples of when world leaders had to work through and solve different, very difficult problems throughout history, right? So this led to treaties, different agreements. He basically outlines the history of that throughout, like, I think starting like the 12th or 13th century. Amazing, also a huge book. The Global Minotaur by Yanis Varoufakis. We have a bunch of Yanis Varoufakis books in here because he's, a PhD economist who also became a finance minister for Greece following their debt crisis. So he's got this really, really unique perspective that I think is very difficult to learn, because why are we reading in the first place? We're reading because we want to learn different perspectives, and he offers a profoundly different alternative perspective on what the US really does on the world stage. I don't agree with him on everything, but his perspective is undeniably competent. Also, he wrote this book, Adults in the Room. This is when he was a finance minister and he was debating and dealing with the EU, dealing with the American establishment, like huge bureaucracies. And this is his memoir on what that experience was like for him. Absolutely game changer of a book. Like, really, really profound book. I just can't recommend it highly enough, okay? Game Theory, this is because he's a PhD in economics. This is his book on game theory. And also pick this up. You need to understand the fundamentals. You don't need to go super deep into game theory, but you have to understand the fundamentals if you're going to, really take the next step and level up in your participation in markets. Get familiar with game theory. The Man Who Solved the Market. This is about Jim Simons, and Renaissance Technologies. This breaks down that fund. And if you don't know what that fund is, that's like the most successful hedge fund quant firm in the history of the world. This book is freaking awesome. And this is another book by the same author about the greatest trade ever, John Paulson's trade. John Paulson turned I don't even know, a billion and a half into 15 or 35 billion, and he profited $15 billion, something like that. the greatest trade ever. It is the greatest trade ever. This breaks down exactly how it went down, and awesome, awesome book also. Last Man Standing, Jamie Dimon. This is obviously a book about Jamie Dimon. And Jamie Dimon is a controversial figure nowadays, but you can't deny his extreme competence. This man, and I'll share one thing from the book because I can't this is a longer video, so I don't want to spend too much time on any one book. But anecdote from this book. Jamie Dimon is known on Wall Street as like being the hardest working man on Wall Street. But you know what when they interviewed his wife in this book, what she said? She said that Jamie's doesn't work too much. Jamie's just the most efficient man in the world. And I found that to be so inspiring. I would love it as a workaholic. I would love it if my wife one day described me as not a workaholic, but as the most efficient man in the world. There's a lot to learn from Jamie. I would argue that he saved our country in 2007. Like, maybe not in the most ethical way, but what this guy has done, continues to do, he should be president. Twilight of Sovereignty. This guy, Walter Wriston, was the former chairman of Citicorp. The predictions he makes about the world at this time and the perspective he gives you, because this is an older book, but the perspective he offers about the state of America at that time and then his predictions about what America will become are super profound. Definitely read this. The End of Normal, amazing book. You need to read this if you want to understand the American economy and its risks for the future, okay? History Has Begun, another amazing book that breaks down a really interesting perspective on how, like it's kind of one of those like the future is Asia kind of books, and it really forces you to think about America in a much more sober terms, which is something I continuously find people are terrible at doing. People are very bad at perceiving America in its current constitution, right? How it's currently formed with its inequalities, its maybe caste systems that are present, right? So, I encourage you to read this. The Seventh Sense, a very similar book to History Has Begun, but awesome book. Awesome, awesome book if you want to just, again, think a little differently about the world that you live in and get that a little bit more of that edge, right? Princeton Guide to Historical Research, very self-explanatory, but it'll help you think about how to teach yourself about history better. 0 to 1, I'm sure you've seen this on a lot of reading lists before, but it's on those lists for a great reason. If you want to know how to build businesses, if you want to know how to think better as an entrepreneur in first principles, like we keep talking about here, read this. The Social Leap. Remember when everyone was reading, I think, Sapiens it was? This also came out, and this is a better book than Sapiens, even and it's way more backed by science also. Read The Social Leap. You will understand our origins, a little anecdote from it. When our, ape ancestors were getting pushed out of the rainforests, right? What effectively happened is we had to deal with a new type of predator because when we were living in the trees, we were really just dealing with snakes and cats, right? That was what was feeding on us, literally, or that's what was putting us at risk. But when we got pushed out into the grasslands, right, that is when our social leap occurred. Why? Well, because we had to learn how to defend ourselves from, when we didn't have literally a tree to run up, right? So if there was a cheetah or lion or something even scarier in the grasslands and it was going after us, like a bear or something, I don't know. We learned how to throw rocks, but the key thing is when you throw one rock as one person at a predator, it doesn't do much, right? But when a group of like 12 or 24 people throw a rock at something, it goes away. So literally throwing rocks in groups is literally what led us to socializing. And it makes a lot of sense. Think about the quarterback. Think about Steph Curry, 3-point shots. Think about why you throw a baseball with your dad in the backyard to bond. It's because it is that deeply entrenched in us. So yeah, read this book. Vincent Cronin's Napoleon. I talked about this book actually pretty recently. Just one of the best books I've ever read. It's a very old book. It's a phenomenal history book. So just, read it. Hypersanity. We have 2 Neil Burton books here. Super underrated author. Unbelievably underrated. And also, guys, you're gonna continue to notice if you haven't noticed already. There are a lot of books in here you won't really find anywhere else, and that's why you're watching, hopefully. So Hypersanity, this is literally teach you how to think about thinking, right? How to understand your thoughts so that you can like literally transcend thoughts, meta thinking. They touch on techniques that the CIA uses to do this to solve more difficult problems. Just awesome book. I've read this book 4 times, I think. Really great. It's also not all. This is another book I've read many times, maybe even more than 4 times. Hide and Seek, The Psychology of Self-Deception. This is about your ego defenses. This is the only book I've ever read that literally starts with a warning label, okay? Because it's very provoking, because it's designed to help you identify how your ego defends itself in a very technical way. And if you understand how you deceive yourself and how you fall into different cognitive biases and dissonances, which is really your biggest risk as an adult, is just like engaging in your own cognitive dissonance and deceiving yourself into being prideful, into doing all these silly things, right? So you have to read this book. This is like, some of these are optional and fun or whatever. This is not at all. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Shout out Michael Carhalios for recommending these, but he actually bought me this book and mailed it to me. Shout out to him. I really loved this is one of those books where you honestly only need to learn, like, read the first half. But the first chapter, the thesis is so strong, and it just allows you to recognize, just like to really put your values into perspective, right? And it forces you to self-reflect about what really matters to you and what things are worth like brushing over and what aren't. It's really, really good. The Rise of Superman. This is one of those human performance books. So if you're into flow states and you want to learn how to like actually engage in deep work and to be really productive and to continue to push your productivity to a higher level, read this. Similar, very similar book to Rise of Superman, Mozart's Brain and the Fighter Pilot. This is like not a typical book that I like to read, but like, kind of let me look at the cover. It's a little bit corny, but so good, though. Really, really good book. Very short one, too. There Is No How by Kapil Gupta. This is one of the... Kapil Gupta has really helped me a lot. A lot, a lot. His perspective on prescriptions and prescription seeking and deconstructing how the average individual, like he just identifying, what am I saying? He helps to illuminate the cognitive dissonance that all of us carry. Like, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that we all have, and there's so many ways for us to improve in our ability to think. And he just describes these things, like these behaviors that we're all engaged with, in such amazing detail, and it makes it so simple and it's so obvious. It's just very profound. Another Kapil Gupta book. This is a little more esoteric, but just really thought-provoking, and will just kind of make you feel focused and at the top of a mountain. Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Guys, this is a very important book for a lot of reasons. Just so you know, this is the first superhero book that, like, literally Superman, all of the comic books that you're familiar with, right? All of that is inspired from this, the Ubermensch, Zarathustra. This is the most empowering book ever written. It's dangerous in that sense. That's why Nietzsche's a complicated guy. We have to just be real. Like, Nietzsche, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Nazi Germany, right? The Nazis were reading Nietzsche and finding fulfillment and motivation from him, but at the same exact time, people in concentration camps were reading Nietzsche, the same books, and feeling empowered and motivated because of him. An undeniable, like to call what he writes philosophy and not like religious almost, it's like somewhere in between, right? Because if you think about it, a good enough philosophy just becomes a religion. But the impact of this is insane. And I would actually argue that the first person who I believe in the world who became a Ubermensch is Howard Hughes. I mean, the life of Howard Hughes he's the first American billionaire. He's who in Elon Musk's earlier life, people used to compare him to. Iron Man, Batman, all these stories are literally inspired off of the life of Howard Hughes, guys. Christopher Nolan, by the way, he was trying to make his Christopher Nolan has a screenplay that is his favorite, he says, that is actually on about Howard Hughes, but Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio made a movie about Howard Hughes when he was starting to raise money to make that movie. And instead, he made a movie about the Dark Knight, which you know, the Batman movies, because it was the character that's most similar to Howard Hughes, in his own words. This book, this biography, not the other one, the more popular one, this one is amazing. Read this. His life is so insane. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, you'll learn about what to do in some instances, but mostly probably what not to do with power. But just an absolutely undeniably exciting life. Reality by Peter Kingsley. I'm just going to leave it there. In the Dark Places of Wisdom by Peter Kingsley. I'll also just leave that there. The Portable Greek Historians. This is just like one of those Penguin portable books. It's just like has all this Greek history in it. Definitely get one of these. It's a great thing to just kind of pick up, read 20 pages here and there, not like something you want to just sit and go front to back, right? Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle. I talk about this sometimes, refer to it all the time. It's great reference. You have to read it. Same thing with The Republic by Plato. You have to read it. Force and Statecraft, a little bit more political sciencey, but it's awesome. Awesome. Same thing with Considerations on France. Very old book, very, very old political philosophy book. You got to read it. The Inner Reaches of Outer Space. See, this is where we're getting a little more esoteric, but man, this is just a poetic, beautiful book that helps you understand the universe, the reality deeper. All right. Sculpting in Time by Andrei Tarkovsky. This is our kind of Russian section. This is one of the most famous, if you're like a film major, you have to watch Tarkovsky movies. But this is his book about sculpting in time, about filmmaking, and it's just a beautiful philosophical book. It's just a philosophy book. Yeah. Nothing is true and everything is possible. If you want to really understand like Russian culture and what makes it different to America, in a much more by a Russian, this is what you want to read. It's awesome. Almost Zero. This is probably the most controversial book I have on this list. This is by one of Vladimir Putin's former advisors, Vladislav Surkov, who we've also talked about in this channel before. It's like a gangster novel. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. But don't. But again, some of these books, I'm not recommending you like do the things that are in them, right? But these are good books to read and understand, and it's like psychology, right? You want to understand other people's psychology. It's a little bit Machiavellian, maybe. That's probably the best criticism. The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung. Very short little book. I think it's just like just world class. I mean, Carl Jung this is in my opinion his best work, and it's so short and just effective. It'll cut right to your core. If you ever do like a psychedelic or something like that, if you read this afterwards, good idea. Seeing with the mind, and I don't recommend psychedelics per se. Seeing with the Mind's Eye, the history, techniques, and uses of visualization. Good luck finding this book, but amazing, just like a great tabletop book. The techniques that you can learn about like these different meditation techniques and visualization techniques to help you literally visualize the things that you wanted to become a better dreamer and all these things. Profound, and just like some of the images in it and the art in it is just amazing. The Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson. I would recommend that you listen to this one, but man, if you really want to learn how to think in first principles about what people believe and why, and how they create meaning in the world, this is what you need to do. Oh, and this is a picture of me and Jordan. What's up, Jordan? Encounter with Self by William Blake. Holy cow, read it if you want to just blow your mind off. That's actually a Russell Brand recommendation, and I would, because we have a Russell Brand recommendation here, we're adding this book, which I think is very underrated. Revolution by Russell Brand. Really great. Profound. Deep. Awesome. Politics of Experience, I think might be, I don't know if this might be another Russell Brand recommendation. I'm not super sure. But this is kind of a hip, like one of those famous like 60s hippie books, but it's very sophisticated actually. Very, very sophisticated. Would recommend this as well. The Dream in the Underworld, I just finished this. Awesome. Graham Hancock, Supernatural. Awesome, but more fun. Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. Mind blowing. I mean, it will fundamentally change how you think about the nature of consciousness and collective consciousness, life, interspecies, kind of just like how it'll just completely disrupt how you perceive what you are as a human being living in this world, and it's in a good way. Okay, now, probably the most controversial part of this video. The spiritual journey of George Washington. George Washington, we just think of him as like some corny dude with white hair who's a slaver. I know, blah, 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 okay? But George Washington is like a great spiritual being. I can't emphasize this enough. And you know who described him as a great spiritual being? The Indians, like these chiefs, and you'll read it in this book. Like the Indian chiefs back then would, because he's like this 6'4" with this guy with a halo, just like he had a halo, and he had this aura about him. There was something very magical that was taking place with George Washington. And keep in mind, George Washington was a devout Christian, and in the best way possible, meaning because obviously our founding fathers were very anti-church, but they were very pro-Christ. You didn't notice, right? Like very pro-Christ. And so George Washington just preached this message of fuck the church, but develop your own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's what he did very famously. Um, in this book, he has all his Monday morning, Monday evening, Tuesday morning, and every day of the week prayers. Okay. I honestly, not to be weird, but I have used those prayers in my own daily life. I continue to come back to this book. It's been really meaningful to me. Marcus Aurelius Meditations. I mean, I almost didn't even want to have this in here because a better book to read would be this, Imitation of Christ. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is Elon Musk's favorite book. You'll read it in a day. It's so fun. It's so thought-provoking. Just awesome. Great time. Okay. The Man Who Took Trips. This is one of the weirdest books I've ever read. I love it so much. Good luck finding it. It's a very rare book. What do I say about this? It's about a man and his wife, and they take LSD together, and they have sex, and then they have out of body experiences together, and then they travel the astral realm together. And this is a book by Royal that apparently interviews them, and they share their experiences with him, and yeah, it's just weird. And like I had this amazing experience in San Francisco once. I was in like this one of these old bookstores, antique bookstore kind of things, and I just picked up this old book of Egyptian like hieroglyphics and things like that. And the owner of the bookstore came up to me just like all weird, just like hello. I was like hello, and he told me to buy this book, and I was like okay, I'll buy it. And he's like I don't have it. I was like okay, but he told like it was a very weird thing. I'm not super convinced he was even real. And lastly, or second to last, I guess, Aldous Huxley's Island. This is everyone's familiar with Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel, but this is his utopian novel, his last book, his self-proclaimed favorite book, very underrated book, right? Brave New World, his dystopian novel, right? Read this. This is actually where the name Palaview comes from. So if that interests you, read it. And also, if you're like, I would encourage you, if you're going to start a family soon or something like that, to read this because it really has awesome dialogue about how to, think about raising kids and the values that you should, teach them and how to think in first principles about raising kids, actually. And last but not least, is this the best cover of the bunch? I think it is. My book. If you want to transform in just 100 pages, this is how you do it. Do I read my own book like Kanye? Oh, yeah, I do. Oh, yeah, I do. Have I been reading other books a lot lately? And it's only continued to grow my confidence about the quality of my book? Oh, yeah, it has. Do I feel like Kermit in that meme right now? Oh, yeah, I do. Gentlemen, that is today's video. I hope you find these books helpful. I hope that as you go deeper into your own self-development journey, you realize that there is genuine utility in reading books. And take the advice of Naval Ravikant. Read the best books over and over and over again. Don't focus on reading too many books, okay? These books, I assure you, are worth reading. I've done the work. I've read many other books. I've read, I think, I would say easily around 300 books. And this is 50, okay? Probably more than 300. So this is a great list, I assure you. And another piece of advice from one of my mentors, Victor Niederhofer, from when I was a child, don't read a book, like try to read old books. So if you are stuck between which book to read the older one, unless it's mine. I'll see you guys.